Good morning.
Morning.
We are going to dive right in today, but we have a guest day, which is super fun because usually it's just Tom and I, making dumb jokes and talking about dumb stuff here. So we have to be somewhat better today, Tom, I guess.
I know. I feel like we're on better behavior when we have a guest.
Yeah, just mildly.
I didn't even clean the room though. So
yeah. Well, I just want to apologize, Marni, because I have had the craziest 2 weeks of travel, all in good ways, but my voice, I was at a 5-hour networking meeting last night for a group that is all about the Grateful Dead. So there's a Dead cover band playing and it's awesome, but talking to people, like my voice this morning is absolutely shot. So I have thrown every bio nerd trick that I know at me this morning to try to mitigate the 2 weeks of like flying and busing and Ubering. And so my voice is all messed up this morning. So sorry about that.
Well, it sounds fun. It sounds like it was worth it.
It was definitely worth it. I had a blast last night. Actually, one of the sponsors was a guy who I'd known for a long time who started a new tequila company called Goza Tequila, and it is breathtakingly amazing if you like tequila. So there may have been a fair amount of tequila involved in that event. I may or may not. Tequila's medicine, right? I mean,
I'm sure in some way, maybe not the way we use it, but
yeah, totally. So Marni, welcome. Let's dive right in. Tell us a little bit about you. I love your story, so I can't wait to talk about this, but let's hear it.
Oh, cool. Thanks so much for having me, guys. This is super fun. My name is Marni Wandner. I'm a health and performance coach. I primarily work with creative professionals, folks in the music industry, because that's my background, but all kinds of different creative professionals, executives, business owners, and a bunch of different industries. I primarily help people do everything from manage their stress and stop burning themselves out, which is how I got into all of this, to building resilience and releasing limited beliefs and building confidence. I help people with time management and productivity, but it's all kind of centered around my training as a health coach in how do we get ourselves to do the things we know we should, quote unquote, do, but we don't do them for our own sake. So it's very much kind of rooted in that. So
is there something more fucked up about creative professionals and musicians? that we like? I mean, as both a creative professional and a, lifelong tampering with music, I'm like, well, I mean, I fit right in the middle of this mess. What's going on with those guys?
Well,
yeah, what's going on with those guys?
That's my background. Yeah,
sure.
That's where I come from. I consider myself a creative professional. I think all entrepreneurs are creative professionals. And what I've seen through my own progression through 20 years in the music industry and some surrounding industries, being a marketing person, is that creative people tend to skew into areas like perfectionists, overthinkers, people that, high achievers, high performers. But also, I mean, that can be applied to a lot of different industries and a lot of different people. But in addition to that, the creative industry lifestyle, especially the music industry lifestyle, which is where I come from, is unstable, unpredictable, erratic schedules. It's really hard to kind of know what your day-to-day is going to be like. Who are you going to be working with? What country are you going to be in? What time zone are you going to be in? Who are you talking to from all around the world? And so there's a lot of instability and kind of chaos, to be honest. And so at least the music industry, and then I see it also in even marketing and advertising, other arts centric industries, that there's an attraction of people that tend to run on adrenaline. And so it's the tricky thing there is, am I enjoying this because I like the feeling of running on adrenaline and I thrive on that? Or am I heading towards a burnout where I can't work for a little while because I'm not okay. And so I feel like that is something I see a lot in people, including myself, where you don't distinguish between the two until it's too late.
Yeah. And when that happens, is that kind of universal presentation? Like, do people just sort of like flip the switch off and they're like, I'm useless, I'm done?
Yeah, I was going to ask even Matt to follow on that question. Is anyone truly in love with it, or do they do it because they get that rush and then they're all aimed at burnout at some point, even if you're really enjoying it?
Yeah, exactly. That's the question, right? Because we don't we might be attracted to the job or the career or the industry that we're working in because it's a match for us. It's a very exciting, there's lots going on. There is this, we tend to thrive on that energy. So yes, how much of it is, and when does it stop being, this is me, this is my jam. I love this. I really I thrive under pressure. You hear people say that all the time. I do great when I have a deadline and I wait until the last minute and then I nail it. And that's great, but that's unsustainable. So, this is part of it is kind of helping people that maybe function like that and don't know another way, because that is not generally a sustainable way to have an entire lifetime career.
Interesting. And so I have found myself over the years, I have a web design company that deals in just, high pressing, like the gas pedal of going forward is on the floor for the last 23 years, basically. And I haven't gotten to the point where I'm just and just completely done. But there are days now that never used to happen. But there are days now where I'm just not feeling it. And that is, I think, almost like it's almost like the canary in a coal mine for me right now. Cause I'm like, wow, that's happening more than it ever has. Cause it never used to happen. And now 23 years in, I'm like, am I just getting old, or is this really just bullshit? And I need to dial it back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Tom and I have had a million conversations about both of our careers where I think this kind of,
and it doesn't necessarily have to be this high stakes all the time. Sometimes it's just the grind of it. It's
totally.
Yeah, why I've been doing this for 23 years. I remember telling one of my newer associates, and she's brilliant. And I wasn't bitching at her. I'm like, look, this is a problem in our industry. Here's what's going on. And I'm telling you this because when you start your own clinic and you leave and you go out on your own. And she goes, why would I ever want to? And I'm like, oh, yeah, all right, you're smarter than me, right there. That's it.
You have already you're enlightened already.
I had hair before this happened.
Yeah, and what I do like about. Good, sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to say, to answer, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're quote unquote burnt out, which is such a buzzword now. It doesn't mean that you're burnt out because you had a bad day or because you're tired one day or because you're over it one day, but like you said, Matt, if it starts getting more and more frequent, if it's something that didn't used to happen and now it's happening more and more and more, and it's not only am I over it, but I'm apathetic. I have compassion fatigue. I don't even care anymore. I can't make decisions. It's beyond being oh, I'm tired all the time. But when it's really starting to affect your day to day and you're starting to kind of question everything and why am I even doing this? It's not because you're bored with your work, which can totally happen. And you might just have to switch something up. But burnout really comes in, like you said, that canary in the coal mine of this is happening more and more. That's when you start really seeing it kind of affect maybe not even your work, but other areas. Oh, I'm snapping at people a lot. I'm really irritable all the time. I don't know what's up with me. People come to me I just feel like crap and I can't get out of this. It's like a funk, but it's all these kind of symptoms of not being able to manage the stuff that's coming at you and not taking a break sufficiently for a very long period of time. It adds up.
Yeah. And I think that's really kind of where I think when I have a moment of lucidity in those sort of burnout days, I'm like, all right, this is And the candidly, I mean, I guess I have a little bit of self-awareness. So like I'll maybe double down on meditation for a week or I was talking to Tom last week. I started doing this tap therapy stuff, which has been super cool. And so like I'll find something that kind of like shakes it up a little bit to try to like level me out. But like candidly, all I'm doing is looking for how to get back to the part where I've buried the gas pedal on the floor. You know what I mean? Like, and it's not, it's therapeutic in a triage kind of way, but not in a like, let's fix it forever.
It's a tourniquet.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, and I think that's actually like a bigger problem, obviously, that I think, you know, we've talked about on here a million times, right? Like post-COVID, especially if you are in almost any industry imaginable, but for sure technology of any kind, I mean, your shit is pinned. You are around the clock going crazy, and it's, you know, and at what point do we all kind of have to say, okay, let's stop. This is too much.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it's that cycle, that burnout cycle of like, okay, you know, or getting close to it, right? Like, okay. And you do, you know, obviously you have these, you know, things that you already incorporate into your daily life that you know about. Okay, I'm going to double down on meditation. I'm going to do, you know, some therapeutic things that I know will help me bring back. But the goal really is to have it so that you have it built into your day, and that you're not going on this roller coaster where like, oh shit, oh I'm burning out, I got to do the thing. Okay, and then oh my god, I'm burning, you know. Because that's just not great for our nervous system.
No, so I guess along those lines, do you see sort of recurring themes, I guess is the right way of saying this, with people like from in the creative, like basically are all creatives kind of have like a fairly similar trajectory that gets easier for you to sort of peel back with them and say, hey, I've seen 50 people, 100 people now do the exact same thing. You gotta, you know, and then like once you have identified, like, what do you do? Like, what are some things that you kind of deploy with them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to generalize, like it's not like every single creative person does this, but you know, and also people that are, you know, not creatives, you know, that wouldn't consider themselves creatives are also can experience this. It's just that creative people are, and high performing people, high achieving people that kind of aim for a certain level of you know, work, whether it's working around the clock or whether it's, you know, all these different circumstances, are a little bit more predisposed to it, I'm seeing. But yeah, there is definitely a little bit of a trajectory, you know, of like there's that hustle culture in a lot of our work of, you know, you got to keep on the grind, you got to keep going, you got to keep going. And yes, of course, you know, there's a certain threshold where, you know, do I push myself to do more today, or is today the day that I need to take a little bit of care of myself? And that really, like you said, Matt, it's that self-awareness. But not all of us even want to have that on a daily basis, because we want to, you know, keep going, whether we're scared that someone else is going to do it before us and we need to do it faster, or whether we want to do it better, or whether, you know, we get caught in like that perfectionist cycle that I was talking about before. So for me, the other thing that I incorporate into my work is the Chinese 5 elements. And I use a system that my clients can take an assessment. And when we know what their results are of that assessment, we know what is their primary element, what is their lowest element, you know, it's everything in between, because we all have all 5 in us. It's just how much of each and what's the percentage and what's the order. We get a really clear picture right away of, oh, we're a little bit lacking in this. We've got a lot of this, you know, so I can see right away and I can explain to them, you're not crazy. The reason that you do things this way is because this is how you are. And instead of it just being like, well, good luck with that, you know, then there's a system that we kind of use built into our work, which is how we build up some of the stuff that you're lower in, and where do we start so that it's not so hard. So if someone's like, oh man, I really would love to, I know I need to work out, but I can't get myself to do it, and they're low in the element that corresponds to momentum, exercise, moving forward, you know, strategy and planning and things like that, they'll probably see it show up in other areas of their life. And if we can work on that element through all kinds of things, but neuroplasticity exercises, things that kind of help form new neural pathways in their brain to help them actually be able to do that after their whole life they haven't, quote unquote, been able to. That's where we start seeing real changes. And then we also look at like, what are you eating? How are you fueling your body? What decisions are you making on a daily basis? And what's your mindset in that moment?
So you said Chinese medicine, and I know Tom's like jumping out of his skin right now.
No, I was going to let it go. I was going to sit back.
No, I love it, and I'm smiling because Tom, what's your PhD in?
It's a clinical doctorate, Matt. Yes. Acupuncture and Chinese medicine. I've been in practice for 23 years now.
Yeah, and so like you hit right on Tom's like super spot.
You know, like, and this is the great thing, Marni. You're saying the things that like we intuitively do. Now we're using different approaches. Clearly, I'm putting needles in somebody. But, you know, when we look at a person, right, we don't want to put them into a bucket, right? You said it yourself. We've got 5 different elements. Everybody has them to be a whole person. Which ones are the strongest ones? Which are the weakest ones? What do I need to lean into? What do I need to support, right? And a lot of times when we talk in the 5 element world, our greatest strengths are in the ones we're also the weakest in, right?
100%.
You know, like, the creatives, you know, this liver element, right? The wood element, that's where we get our creativity, but that's also where we get our frustration, our anger, our like, I can't fucking get this, get out of my way. And yet get
out of my way.
You know, this is the growth, and this is the exploration and the going out there, you know, so finding that balance and even how you talk to each of those people, right? It has to change.
Yes.
So Tom has hidden this little gem from me apparently forever. So now I'm like a little annoyed with Tom.
I said one thing my mentor said to me a few weeks ago. I said one thing my mentor said to me, and you were like, "Yeah, that's right."
Yeah. What was that? What did you say?
You can do everything.
Oh,
you just can't do it all at once. And that slapped you. I was like,
that kicked me right in the balls. I was like, oh shit, that is right. Yeah.
Wow.
That was
what was your reaction to that, Matt? What was your
it was like a complete gut punch. Yeah. Cause I was like, oh, fuck, you're totally right. I can do everything, but I just can't do it today. Right. Like I can't.
Right.
And honestly, it's funny because I hate doing too many things at once, because then if something works, you're like, well, fuck, which one was it? Was it this thing that I did or that thing that I did? Was it a synergistic effect? And that was right around the same time as my first little tapping exercise. So between the two of those things, it was sort of like cognitive bomb dropped and, you know, direct tap into my CNS like at the same time. And whatever it was, I think since then I have taken a much more sober look at my to-do list. Let's put it that way. Right. So instead of being like this client emailed me at noon, I wouldn't say I was having a heart attack by 12:01, but by 12:05, I was like tapping my toes, like, fuck, I gotta get to this. Now it's like, well, they're probably in the middle of 900 things also. So if I don't get back to them right this second, like they're not going to die. And also I don't cure cancer. So this shit is probably not that important to begin with. Right. So,
right. The perspective.
Yeah. So I think that's been helpful, but like, I mean, that took me 20 to almost 30 years to hear that, you know, even though I've been to, I can't count how many networking events and read how many, you know, look, I'm the guy who like absorbs all of those stupid books, like, you know, health books, self-help books, you know,
personal development.
Kumbaya, yeah. Personal development. I've read all of them. And I even subscribe to this thing called Headway, which allows you to read a book in like 18 minutes. It's like the Cliff's Notes of the Cliff's Notes. It's actually, it's like $50 a year. It's amazing.
I don't think they're called Cliff Notes anymore. One of my millennial employees called them something else, and I was like Cliff Notes, and she was like, I don't know what that is.
Oh my god!
Well,
I was like a little version of the
Well, Headway will shrink those. Yeah, it's a yellow thing.
It had stripes on the front.
Yeah. But this thing is great, and it's like all to stuff more of this like kind of, you know, guru in a book kind of knowledge into your brain. And like, I've heard that thing that Tom said thousands of times in different ways, but it took me
Totally.
that long to hear it. And I think I heard it because it was in this context, right? It was on a recording, and Tom and I get into kind of a flow state on these things where we're just really kind of peeling back a topic. And I was like, I don't know, the pieces just sort of.
Well, yeah, you know, you were also talking exactly about, I think, what Marnie's point is. You were like, look, I found this notebook from art school and I want to write this book on this. Like years and years ago, this was relevant. Now it's even more relevant. But I got this going on, and I got that going on, I got this going on. And I'm like, yeah, they're all good ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, what he's discussing, Marty, is like a real disappointment to me. Actually, Tom, I have not grown past this. I wrote a book outline in 1997 that is almost identical to a book I'm working on right now. And
wow, that's such consistency.
But I'm sitting there going, I forgot all about that. I'm like, God damn it. I have been failing to write this book since 1997. That's really depressing. And that's when Tom was like, you can do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it could have just been waiting for the right time to come out. You needed more life experience to write that book.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So talk to me about this assessment. Like, how did you get down this road? Because it seems like a pretty pragmatic way to kind of deconstruct this problem and then diagnose it and then subsequently move into fixing it. Like, so what got you on this path, and like, how do you start with somebody?
Yeah, I do think it is a pragmatic way, and I have to be careful how I talk about it sometimes, because when you start, talking about the elements, people tend to think, ooh, and it's like, no, it's so rooted in what you already know and reality. And it's so, you literally can look outside and be like, I see a tree. I know what wood is. I know what fire does. I know what metal does, and understand right away what these qualities that we all have do and what their strengths are, and like Tom said, what their weaknesses are and what gets in their way. So I was drawn to it. I've always been drawn to Chinese medicine and stuff like Ayurveda, and I've always been into acupuncture and things, and just really fascinated by it. And a friend of mine, Carrie Davidson, who's this amazing human, she wrote a book and kind of developed this whole system based on the Chinese elements, and another book that she collaborated with a doctor on. But she wrote this book, The 5 Archetypes, and created this kind of system built around it all. And I studied with her. I've known her for a really long time, and I saw like the whole thing emerge, and I was like, this is really fascinating. I really want to, immerse myself in this. And this is long after I became a health coach. So I'm always like looking to add layers to my coaching and ways that I can help people do what it is that they want to do. And to use your word, I mean, it was a really pragmatic approach to it. And I'm really interested in neuroscience and how neuropsychology, can help people understand what they need to do to get things done and all that. So it really kind of tied into all of that, and gave a really clear roadmap for not just me to help the client, but for the client to help themselves. So usually we start with them taking the assessment. It takes about 10 minutes. They send me their results. We talk about it. I, look at it and analyze it in the way that I've learned. And I can say, all right, well, this is probably what's going on for you. When I lay this out, does that sound familiar? And they're like, oh my God. They're like, it's like you are following me around and you're seeing how I react to everything. And it just kind of starts us out on a little bit of a fast track to understanding where they're getting in their own way and where they can start growing.
Interesting. And so like, what would be like an indicator? Let's just kind of like, so you said like maybe they're light on one of these things, right? Like, so do you sort of have, I don't want to say a bag of tricks, but do you have like, you kind of have a starting point of like, okay, if you're really low on wood or fire or whatever, right? Like, I mean, what would be, I don't know, I'm just so we can kind of, I'd just love to hear more of this. Tom seems to know all about this and just doesn't share with anybody. But
look, man, we do an hour a week. What do you want?
So, right. No, but like, so like if somebody was
normally
low,
talking about AI or psychedelics anyway.
Yeah, right.
It's going to open up a whole new area of your relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, you know what? Look, I like you, and I do think that creative people might be more prone to this. But like when I hear something, when I first heard about acupuncture decades ago, I was interested in it immediately, right? Not because I knew anything about it, but because I am fascinated by anything that has got a potential pathway to doing me better, right? Like, so whether it's
Right.
acupuncture or meditation, I did Dharma for a little while. I did, and you just keep, oh, that sounds cool. Like, let's try that out. Right. And I don't know, like my wife for example, is like the opposite, whatever that is in the Chinese elements. She is like zero creativity. The world is a spreadsheet. Like it's like, when she cooks, it's like, and it says a quarter tablespoon of pepper. And she's like the one like, okay, there's a quarter tablespoon, like in the exact, there is no interpretation. It's all
So,
black and white.
Matt, there was a game we used to do.
Yeah.
I was about to say that. I'm like, does she have any digestion issues or respiratory disorders? Is where I was gonna go.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like she is not interested in these things at all. In fact, Tom and I were talking. She has this crazy TMJ thing right now, and Tom's like, "Yeah, we could totally work with that." I told her that. She's like, "No, nope, thank you, not going to happen." And I was like, "I don't understand. Like, you won't even try it. Your jaw's killing you. Like, you can't even like." So she's been going to PT instead to get, manual, like this guy's got his thumb in her mouth and like doing all this great. And I was like, that sounds better.
That always cracks me up. I'm like, yeah, sure. You'll let the PT with like 10 studies on dry needling jam needles in your mouth without any theory.
Yeah, right.
I've got case studies and peer-reviewed journals and thousands of years of history, but no, mine's bullshit.
But let this guy stick his thumb. Yeah. And so like, I guess creatives are like, I don't know if we're all prone to it, but like, I mean, we all like a good story, right? And to me, like when somebody told me about acupuncture, I'm like, this is a great story. Like, tell me more, right? And then you start seeing needles and you're like, all right, the story has a practical part of it, right? And like, that is interesting. So I can totally follow along with how you got to where you're at. I guess where I think creatives often drop off is synthesizing that into some kind of practice, right? Because I think a lot of people are like, cool, what's the next funky thing to go play with, right? Like, and you have a 1 inch deep knowledge of 10,000 things, but like you kind of stop there, right? And so like you get this into practice. Like what are some things that can kind of move the needle for people? I'm just curious, like what does that look like in an ongoing practice with you?
Yeah, I mean, so the way that I usually work with people, we're looking at different aspects of them, right? So somebody might be like, my sleep is fine, but and then we'll look into it and be like, is it? Because that's another thing. But but I can't get myself to exercise. That's one I hear a lot, and people think that their goal is I need to exercise more, and like, yeah, that would be great for a number of different reasons, especially for their stress level. But their real goal is how to get across the chasm of why they can't get themselves to exercise. Like that's the actual thing that we end up working on. And that usually is because there's a low, I mean, that's the wood example. Like if their wood is low, it's not, no one doesn't know that they should exercise more. That's not like shocking to people. It's that they're like, I've tried all these things. I do it like so-and-so said to do because that person's smart. And that, the problem with the wellness industry, is that everyone says that this is the right way to do everything and everyone should do it this way. And that's not true. We're all bio-individualistic and, there's different things for different people. So that's where we start, is looking at these elements and going, okay, your wood is super low, but your fire is super high. You are probably bored out of your mind when you try to stick with any routine or try to do anything that you don't want to do in that moment. So if you've been trying to do I don't know, running every morning, there's no way that's going to stick. Like that's just not going to happen. So we can feed into their strength, their gift as a fire person, and give that, what are some things that you truly enjoy? What are some things that you can have in your back pocket to create some variety? So you can make that impulsive decision in the moment, which is what a fire person would find pleasurable, is to, what do I want to do right now? And just giving yourself choices that are all good, none of them are sitting on the couch with a bag of potato chips, but you're kind of, all right, so this is how I need to get into this. And then the sustainability of it comes with like the neuroplasticity exercises, and also literally, this is nothing really to do with the elements, but focusing in on what the motivation is behind the goal and creating systems around that goal. So a lot of people come to me and they're like, I need more discipline. And I'm like, no, you don't. You need a really strong reason for why you want to change, and you need to create systems around how you're going to make it easier for yourself. Because there's like 4 million things in our way every day of getting between us and what we want to do. But if we make it easy for ourselves and set our environment, set our everything up around us, even the people around us, to make that more possible, and we have a really, really strong reason to connect it to, it gets easy, and then we can be consistent in our own way. But that consistency is going to look different for everybody depending on what their element is.
Sure. This show is called Irreverent Health, and it was birthed because of the bullshit that is the wellness sector in general, right? Like, Tom and I have, truly, this show came out of us having the same types of conversations.
It was Gwyneth Paltrow's vagina scented candles that did it.
Yeah.
That tipped us over the edge. Yeah. Yeah. And our first episode was on orgasmic meditation, which, if you've never heard about this, is the biggest crock of shit you've ever heard in your entire life. But it gets ridiculous.
People were getting sexually assaulted? No.
Yeah. But it was ridiculous.
Possibly happen. Yeah.
Well, it was absurd. It was like, you have to rub the clitoris in a clockwise manner like 18 times or something, and I'm like,
15 minutes.
What the
in
fuck
this sector?
is this? No.
Don't worry, they're wearing gloves.
Yeah, and you're like, and they would do it
God.
in front of a parlor of people, like it wasn't, like you'd be in stirrups. Yeah, it's ridiculous. And so so we totally get that, and I think candidly that is, at least our circles of influence. Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but most people we know that aren't into this, like, don't get into it because of that sort of bullshit factor. That's just
it's rife in my field too, but it's because East Asian medicine has had such a long history, and it's still living and breathing, so it changes where it goes. But it was never meant, and Marni, I commend you for kind of taking it this way. It was never meant to be a new age thing. It was, here's a system that we can compare to natural order of things. And it's rooted in that system based over thousands of years of data points of collecting all of this stuff, where we're not trying to pigeonhole you into something, but we want to say that, like, these are your tendencies. And it's not, when I see people putting crystals over acupuncture points, I'm like, you do that, but that is not this.
Right.
I know nothing of that, but that is not this. And there's an expression that I always come back to when drinking water: remember the source. Right? Like there's a rich history. I'm a guest here. I don't look like I'm from East Asian medicine. I have a duty to make sure that I do this in the right way, and that I give credit to those people that came before me. Sorry, that's my soapbox.
No, listen, I like your soapbox, obviously. So Marni, I'll kind of following down on that. Like you talked about neuroplasticity exercises a little bit, right? Something we've talked about on here. I assume you're not just throwing a Sudoku book at them. Like what kind of like neuroplasticity exercises are we talking about here? Like because I am very interested in neuroplasticity. I'm a big psychedelic person in pursuit of an augmented neuroplasticity state, what does that look like? Like, talk to us about that.
Yeah. So so if you're looking at like somebody that's low in metal, right? Because that's another thing that we'll see. I see everything. I see like all types of different scores. And then obviously, like we were saying before, you see trends and you see, oh, okay, I know this, but if someone is low in metal, for example, they find it hard to the opposite of what you were describing with your wife. So, they find it hard to keep things organized. They might lose things sometimes, especially if they're higher in something like water, where there may be like head in the clouds a little bit. which is great for like somebody that is creative and dreaming up amazing things and, philosophizing about things and writing and, lots of time alone. But if you're trying to find your car keys, it's not great. So, that it can be, or, have a partner that's high in metal, and that can be frustrating, or, your teammates or your staff. So to build that metal, a very simple neuroplasticity exercise for that might be to organize a very small thing for just a few minutes every day. So a corner of your desk or a drawer or a piece part of a shelf, and just literally build that part of your brain that says like, we can put things in an order, whatever that means, tidy it up, put it from big to small, but kind of training your brain in that way. But I wouldn't say to someone, go reorganize your whole hall closet, because that's going to be overwhelming, and they're just not going to lose. They're going to lose interest and not going to do it. So, but these little tiny little bits, it's the consistency of that, over time, and carving that new pathway for yourself. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I now have a system for something that I didn't have a system before, and it just came naturally, and I didn't have to force it and then forgot about it, which is what usually happens.
So those repetitive sort of nurturing, and it's a little phrase I kind of stumbled upon in writing this book, but these repetitive nurturing motions, right, that you're just doing that are kind of, is that something that, regardless of what you're trying to do, I mean, it seems like consistency is a recurring theme in your work. I mean, you've said it a bunch of times here, and it feels kind of like it makes sense, but like, is that sort of repetition kind of what moves us into somewhere else?
Yeah, and it's funny because somebody that is high in metal would have no problem with the repetition and the kind of practice of something, but that's in itself is a built-in challenge, right? And any coach will say, okay, great, we're going to do this. The client will say, great, and the coach will say, what are the challenges that are going to come up with this? Where are you going to hit a roadblock? Let's tackle those right now and talk about what we're going to do when we hit those challenges. And one of the challenges in that would be, I'm going to forget to do it. How am I going to remind myself to do it? And there's where we build in the systems of put something in front of you like create this thing every day. Get, who can you enlist in your life to help you make sure that you do this for a little while so that you're building this muscle? How can you put that motivation behind it too? Like, what happens if you don't build this skill? Do you lose your job because you keep losing the keys to the office? I don't know.
Sure.
How do you kind of make the stakes high enough so people are like, I have to do this? Because then it's up to them to do it, obviously. But the other thing is that I said this a little bit before, but people get really scared by the word consistency. And I really think that consistency, and I've seen this, that doesn't mean that you have to do the same exact thing at the same exact time every single day. There's no way that can happen, even if you are a perfectionist and you want that to happen, because then what's going to happen is when you don't do it, you get mad at yourself and you spiral and blah, blah, blah. So consistency is, to me, showing up in the way that you can that day to meet your goal, to chip away at your goal a little bit in whatever way that you've set up for yourself. And that could mean, all right, you're traveling, so I don't have that, thing that I was going to organize at home or whatever, but I can like stack some books up on the coffee table in the Airbnb I'm at, or I can, just kind of learning how to kind of mold to your surroundings a little bit and find ways to do the thing that you said you were going to do.
And I'm guessing
kind
that
of holding
sort
yourself
of,
to that.
Sure. And I'm guessing that kind of flexibility is probably building a different muscle, right? Like being able to sort of get out. Cause I know I sometimes can get pretty pedantic about, it says to do this exercise for 90 minutes, or it says to do a Tabata for, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, right? Like, and like, sometimes I'm like totally gassed and I'm like, shit, I only did 19 seconds or 18 seconds. And then I like torture myself, like those what's that sect of Christianity that's got like the barbed wire around your around your thigh, and you just like, shit, I gotta, yeah, exactly. I gotta like tighten the barbed wire a little bit, right? And I get on myself about it because it's not like exactly perfect, and I got to imagine that like that's got to play into this a little bit too, just learning to not be so, you know.
Yeah.
And that's a funny one because that could be a wood issue or a metal issue, depending on how it's framed in there.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. And it, I mean, what I really appreciated is like, and Tom, don't take this the wrong way, but like with acupuncture, sometimes it's a little hard to sort of land it practically, because unless you have an acute problem that you're trying to fix, and you can just say, okay, I have a headache, I have migraines, and I went to acupuncture and it fixed the migraines. It's that you're only chasing like a specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
What you're doing is building a sort of a more resilient human being, which has a lot less of a, I guess, finish line is maybe what I'm thinking. But I like the way you've set it up. It's super hyper practical, right? Like this is for people living in the world in 2023. Like it's not philosophic, I mean, it is got components of all these things, but it's not esoteric. It's not hard to understand. You're like, no, I have trouble doing this. Here's how you fix that. Let's move to the next thing, right? It's super practical. And I really dig that because I feel like that's hard to come by.
Yeah, I like the practicality of it. I've got a lot of wood in me, so I do like that pragmatic kind of, like, all right, like we got to get shit done. Like this is how we're going to do it, but there's like we were talking about before, Tom, like, or Matt, both of you guys. So like being that particular thing, right, could be like a wood or metal thing. It's kind of like, that's where people relate to it. Like a wood person might be like, oh, I suck that I didn't do that whole 20 seconds because I like to do it best. And that I wanted to check that accomplishment off my list. And a metal person wants to do it right. And they're like pissed that they didn't do it exactly right. But once somebody can lock into that and go, oh my gosh, I do that. That is how I am. That in itself can be like a little practical tool to unlock why they do things. And then the next step is like, okay, we're not trying to undo anything. We're trying to raise the other stuff around them to support the things that they already do. And I think that kind of helps people understand pragmatically and tangibly, like, oh, I can get control over this. It's not like a mind over matter thing. It's not like a forcing through. It's like a little bit at a time, changing your behaviors.
So we've talked about building things up, right? Like you've been saying like low wood or low metal, right? But like, does the same apply if you have to like bring somebody down? Like, let's say they have too much wood or too much metal. Like, is that all, is that version of the story as valid as the other one that we've been talking about? I'm just curious.
Yeah, but you wouldn't really bring it down. You would kind of support it. So
rising tides raises all ships.
Exactly.
Okay, so like you're not trying to like de-metal somebody. You're not like, hey, dude, you're way too high on metal, bro.
And,
like,
and there's and coming out of East Asian medicine, there's certain elements that you would never, like you wouldn't want to reduce somebody's water. You wouldn't want to reduce somebody's fire.
Right.
I mean, just out of curiosity, why particularly like water, for example? Like what?
That's so that's kidneys, and the idea is that's associated with your essence, which is the nuts and bolts of it is how much time you have on Earth.
So we don't want to fuck with that.
We don't want to short that.
yeah. We don't want to shortchange the water. Yeah, no, we want all the water we can get. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because
and it's more nuanced than that. But
I assume
the 50,000 foot.
But see, that's the pragmatist in me always being like, well, if it can go up, can it come down? Like it's like hyper, like I want the details.
And there's certain times where you would drain certain elements to a degree, right? We're not trying to change who somebody fundamentally is. You're trying to, and I'm sorry, Marni, if I'm putting
no,
words
this is
in your
amazing.
mouth.
I love this. I want to like
you're trying to fundamentally support that person as a whole individual, right? We're not trying to change who they are. We're just trying to make their function better across the board.
Exactly.
Yeah, I had no idea, Marni, that you did it this way. Otherwise, I think I would have been laughing about this interview like a lot earlier, because I know Tom is like loves talking about these. Like, so.
Like you don't get to wax poetically too much when you're not around a bunch of other acupuncturists, and then most of them you don't agree with anyway.
Right.
I would love at some point to study acupuncture, but it's weird about what I do is it really depends on the person. Like there's some people, I barely talk about this stuff. I just use it because I know how they're going to need to hear stuff. I know what's going to work for them and what's probably not going to work for them. I know where they're going to get frustrated. And some people are like, "Ooh, tell me more about my ailments. I want to know like all this stuff." So it really depends on the person as well. And even in a big group,
that's me.
It's hard. If I don't know everybody, so it just depends.
Right. Well, you know what I mean, kind of building on what I said earlier, I've studied Japanese jiu-jitsu for 20 something years, right? And there's a Japanese way of doing everything, right? And then there is a adapted way of doing everything, right? And so my mentor, who I spent the bulk of my time studying under, his mentor brought jiu-jitsu into the Bronx in the 50s and basically severed all ties to Japan. He said, "You know what? I've achieved a body of knowledge from you, and I think it's wildly impractical for the United States in the 1950s." So the style that I learned primarily was an adaptation of it through a lens of practicality, right? He also had a PhD in war psychology, and so he was like, okay, and he would teach this style of jiu-jitsu to police officers who could then put it in use on the streets of New York, right? So it was hyper practical. It is still Japanese martial arts. It's not, that part's, you can't pull that out, but it's how do I use this in a way that's not, bowing to the sunset and, having this like really sort of woo-woo relationship with it. And all of the reverence for the history of it is mostly gone. It's mostly just saying, okay, here's what they meant. Here's how we use it today. And I don't want to like overly simplify what you've said today, but like in my mind, it feels a lot like the same path, right? It's like, okay, here's this body of knowledge that has all this great information, but like, how do you squeeze that into like my life in 2023 as in your case, creative professional or musician? And I think you're right. A CEO of a tech company who's killing it with some crazy new tech is probably just as creative as a painter in a lot of ways,
Totally.
right? Like, I mean, in fact, the head of AI for Microsoft years ago, when I was at a think tank we had the opportunity to hang out with him for the day, said by 2030, he thinks that it's more likely that an art student will run a Fortune 100 company than a Wharton graduate. And because when AI, mind blowing. We could talk about that some other time because it's like an hours long conversation. Because why is that true? And I think it's because everybody, when computers get to do all this stupid stuff that we don't want to do, then the only thing left is that creative sort of energy. Right. So I think you're going to be very relevant, much more so as we get into the AI world, where those creative vibes are going to be sort of more and more necessary to just do a job, right? Like it's, so I think you're in a great space, and I think that your approach has been really cool to listen to.
Oh, thanks. I mean, I struggle with the term creative professionals because I could consider everyone creative. Everyone is a creative. We're all creators of something. And that's why I'm so kind of fervent about entrepreneurs being creatives, because they're literally creating something out of nothing. They had an idea, and they need to kind of put it together. But I think
Awesome.
I think that's an important thing to know.
Where do we find you? How do people get in touch with you? Like, let's just spend a minute on that, because I have actually. So Tom, Marni, and I know each other from a networking group, and I've told everybody about her. I feel very strongly that about her services. So yeah. So how do we find you?
Thank you for that. My website is just marniwandner.com, MarniWandner.com. And I'm on Instagram at Marni Wandner, MarniWandner.
Cool.
Wandner.
Awesome. Marni, thank you so much for coming by. I loved talking to you. And I honestly, I'm with you. I could have this conversation for the rest of the afternoon. And it happens to be a Friday and I don't really feel like working. It's been 2 long weeks of travel. And I'm like, you know what? Can we just like have a glass of wine and talk about this all day? But unfortunately, we all have stuff to do.
Another time, though, for sure. I loved talking to
another
you
time for
guys.
sure. Yeah, thank you so much. And great. You have a good day, Tom. You, Marni.
Yeah, man. This was great, Marni. I really loved it, and hopefully we'll connect in the future.
Definitely.
Yeah, cool.
I would love that. Thank you both so much for having me and for doing what you're doing. I love it.
And Marni, hang right after this. All right, thanks, guys.
Be subversive, irreverent.
Health is wealth, but you knew that.
Everybody knows that.
But so is following us on social media at Irreverent Health. And check out our website for more exclusive content at irreverenthealth.com.
Oh, I like this.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Irreverent Health.